Welcome to History Tales. Today we journey to Syria, a nation grappling with the devastating consequences of a conflict that has raged for over a decade. For over a decade, Syria has been locked in a conflict that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. In this video, we will delve into the complex history of the Syrian War, exploring the factors that led to its outbreak, the key players involved, and the devastating impact it has had on the country and its people. To understand the Syrian conflict, we must first journey back in time to uncover the rich history of this ancient land. Syria, situated at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe, boasts a history as old as time itself. Damascus, the capital city, stands as one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, a testament to Syria's enduring legacy. However, beneath the surface of this vibrant tapestry lay deep-seated tensions and unresolved grievances. The Syrian War is a story of a people's struggle for freedom, of a nation torn apart by violence and despair. In the years leading up to the uprising, Syria was ruled by the iron fist of Bashar al-Assad, who inherited power from his father in 2000. Assad's regime was notorious for its human rights abuses, suppression of dissent, and widespread corruption. In 2011, the winds of change sweeping across the Arab world reached Syria's shores. Inspired by the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, Syrians took to the streets demanding an end to decades of oppressive rule. To comprehend the roots of the Syrian conflict, we must turn our attention to the Assad family, who have held an iron grip on power for over 5 decades. In 1970, Hafez al-Assad, a military officer from a minority Alawite sect, seized control of the government through a bloodless coup. Hafez al-Assad was a shrewd and ruthless leader who consolidated his power by crushing any opposition and cultivating a cult of personality around himself. His regime was responsible for numerous human rights abuses, including the brutal suppression of an uprising in Hama in 1982, which left thousands dead and the city in ruins. Despite projecting an image of strength and stability, the Assad regime's rule was built on a foundation of fear and repression. The Syrian people endured decades of political oppression, with limited freedom of speech, assembly, and association. Adding to the simmering discontent was a widening economic divide. This created a fertile ground for social unrest as resentment towards the regime grew alongside economic hardship. Syria's complex social fabric, woven from a tapestry of diverse ethnicities, religions, and sects, also played a significant role in the lead-up to the conflict. The Assad regime, dominated by the minority Alawite sect, often practiced sectarianism, favoring Alawites in government positions and the military. This created a sense of grievance among the Sunni Muslim majority, who felt discriminated against and excluded from power. The regime's divide-and-rule tactics, exploiting sectarian tensions to maintain control, served to deepen existing social divisions within Syrian society. In late 2010, a wave of popular uprisings, fueled by long-standing grievances and inspired by the fall of authoritarian regimes in Tunisia and Egypt, swept across the Arab world. The Syrian people, emboldened by the successes of their Arab brethren, dared to dream of a different future, one free from oppression and fear. In March 2011, inspired by the events unfolding across the Arab world, a group of teenagers in the southern city of Daraa spray-painted anti-government graffiti on a school wall. The regime's brutal response to the Daraa protests, arresting and torturing the teenagers involved, sent shockwaves across the country. The Syrian uprising began peacefully, with protesters demanding political reforms and an end to corruption. However, the Assad regime, accustomed to ruling with an iron fist, responded with characteristic brutality. Security forces opened fire on unarmed protesters, killing and injuring dozens in cities and towns across the country. the regime's violent crackdown only served to fuel the flames of rebellion, turning peaceful protests into armed resistance. As the Syrian uprising gained momentum, the Assad regime unleashed the full force of its security apparatus upon its own people. Tanks rolled into cities, helicopters fired on protesters, and snipers targeted civilians from rooftops. Amidst the escalating violence, Syria descended into a spiral of chaos and bloodshed, with the once vibrant nation transformed into a battleground. The regime's indiscriminate shelling and aerial bombardments of civilian areas forced millions of Syrians to flee their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries or within Syria itself. In the face of the regime's brutal crackdown, many Syrians who had initially taken to the streets peacefully felt compelled to take up arms to defend themselves and their communities. Defectors from the Syrian army, disillusioned with the regime's atrocities, joined forces with ordinary citizens, forming a patchwork of armed opposition groups. Some groups, such as the Free Syrian Army, initially sought to establish a democratic and pluralistic Syria, while others, driven by Islamist ideologies, aimed to create an Islamic state. As the conflict dragged on, the opposition became increasingly fragmented, with rivalries and infighting erupting between different factions. The Syrian conflict quickly transcended its borders, drawing in regional and international actors with their own agendas and interests. Neighboring countries such as Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon found themselves grappling with the influx of millions of Syrian refugees, straining their resources and exacerbating existing social and economic tensions. The conflict also inflamed sectarian divisions across the region, with Sunni Muslim states largely supporting the predominantly Sunni opposition, while Shia-majority Iran threw its weight behind the Alawite-dominated Assad regime. The involvement of external actors transformed the Syrian conflict into a complex proxy war, with regional powers vying for influence and control. As the Syrian conflict descended into chaos, a new and terrifying threat emerged: the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. Exploiting the power vacuum created by the civil war and the Assad regime's brutality, ISIS rapidly seized control of vast swaths of territory in eastern Syria and western Iraq, declaring a self-proclaimed caliphate in 2014. ISIS, known for its extreme brutality, imposed its reign of terror on the populations under its control, carrying out mass executions, beheadings, and sexual enslavement. The rise of ISIS presented a new and formidable challenge to both the Assad regime and the Syrian opposition, as well as to the international community. The Syrian conflict, initially a domestic uprising against an authoritarian regime, escalated into a full-blown civil war with regional and international implications. The involvement of external actors, each pursuing their own interests, transformed the conflict into a proxy war, with Syria becoming a battleground for competing geopolitical agendas. Russia's military intervention in 2015, at the request of the Assad regime, tipped the balance of power in favor of Assad, enabling his forces to regain lost ground and solidify their control over key areas of the country. The Syrian conflict became a microcosm of wider geopolitical tensions between the West and Russia, as well as between regional rivals such as Saudi Arabia and Iran. Aleppo, a city torn asunder. The Battle of Aleppo, once a bustling metropolis and Syria's largest city, became a microcosm of the conflict's brutality and the human cost of the war. Divided between government forces in the west and rebel groups in the east, Aleppo became a key battleground in the fight for control of Syria. The siege and subsequent fall of eastern Aleppo to government forces in December 2016 marked a turning point in the war, solidifying Assad's grip on power, but at a devastating cost to the city and its people. The Battle for Kobani, a turning point. In the northern Syrian town of Kobani, a small but determined group of Kurdish fighters, known as the People's Protection Units, or YPG, faced the full might of ISIS in a battle that would capture the world's attention. Outgunned and outmanned, the YPG, with the support of US-led airstrikes, put up a fierce resistance, fighting street by street, house by house to defend their town. After months of intense fighting, the YPG, with the help of coalition airstrikes, succeeded in repelling ISIS from Kobani in January 2015, marking the first major defeat for the extremist group. Chemical warfare crossing the red line. The Assad regime repeatedly used chemical weapons against its own people, violating international law. In August 2013, a sarin gas attack in Ghouta killed hundreds, sparking global outrage. The use of chemical weapons was condemned as a war crime. Despite a declared red line, the Obama administration avoided direct military intervention. The US and Russia brokered a deal for Syria to surrender its chemical weapons. However, the Assad regime continued using chemical weapons, highlighting the limits of diplomacy. Section 4, The Fall of Raqqa, the Crushing of ISIS. Raqqa, once a bustling hub, became ISIS's de facto capital in 2014. Public executions and atrocities were rampant. The US-led coalition aimed to liberate Raqqa. In June 2017, the Syrian Democratic Forces launched an offensive. By October, Raqqa was captured, marking a turning point. The city was left in ruins, with many civilians displaced. Section 5, The Ghouta Chemical Attack and International Response. In April 2018, a chemical attack in Douma, eastern Ghouta, killed dozens, including women and children. The attack, attributed to the Assad regime, led to international condemnation and airstrikes by the US, France, and the UK. These airstrikes marked a significant escalation in Western involvement in the Syrian conflict. Section 1, A Nation Uprooted. The Syrian conflict triggered one of the largest humanitarian crises in modern history, uprooting millions of people from their homes and scattering them across the globe. Imagine being forced to flee your home, leaving behind everything you've ever known, your belongings, your memories, your loved ones. This is the devastating reality that millions of Syrians have faced as a result of the ongoing conflict. The sheer scale of displacement is staggering, with over half of Syria's pre-war population of 23 million displaced by the conflict. Families have been torn apart, their lives shattered by the unrelenting violence. Cities once teeming with life have been reduced to rubble, their streets eerily silent save for the echoes of war. The Syrian people have endured unimaginable suffering, their resilience tested to the limit. The conflict has created a generation of Syrians who have known nothing but war, their childhood stolen, their futures uncertain. Section 2, The Refugee Crisis, a Global Challenge. The Syrian refugee crisis has presented an unprecedented challenge to the international community, testing the limits of global solidarity and humanitarian response. Neighboring countries such as Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan have borne the brunt of the crisis, hosting millions of Syrian refugees who have sought safety and refuge within their borders. These countries, already grappling with their own economic and social challenges, have shown remarkable generosity in welcoming Syrian refugees, providing them with shelter, food, and medical care. However, the sheer number of refugees has strained resources and infrastructure in host countries, leading to tensions and challenges. The international community has responded with humanitarian aid and resettlement programs, but the needs of Syrian refugees remain immense. The Syrian refugee crisis is not just a regional crisis, it is a global crisis that demands a coordinated and sustained international response. Section 3, Scars of War, the Human Cost. The Syrian conflict has left deep scars on ordinary people. Children have witnessed unspeakable horrors. The loss of loved ones and homes has taken a heavy toll. Education and healthcare have been severely disrupted. The conflict has exacerbated existing inequalities. Women and girls face heightened risks of violence. Children have been deprived of their education. The elderly and disabled face particular challenges. Section 4. Hope amidst the ruins. Despite the unimaginable suffering and the seemingly insurmountable challenges, the Syrian people have shown remarkable resilience and a determination to rebuild their lives. Even in the darkest of times, glimmers of hope can be found amidst the ruins. Syrian refugees have shown incredible strength and resourcefulness in their efforts to create new lives for themselves and their families in host countries. Within Syria, communities have come together to support each other, rebuilding their shattered lives brick by brick. The human spirit, though tested, has not been broken. The Syrian people have not given up hope for a better future, a future where peace prevails and their country can heal from the wounds of war. It is our collective responsibility, as members of the global community, to stand in solidarity with the Syrian people, to amplify their voices, and to work towards a just and lasting solution to the conflict. A tangled web. The geopolitics of Syria. The Syrian conflict became a chessboard for competing geopolitical agendas, drawing in regional heavyweights like Saudi Arabia and Iran, as well as global powers such as the United States and Russia. Each actor brought its own interests, alliances, and objectives, adding layers of complexity to an already volatile situation. The weight of intervention. The West and the Middle East. The West, led by the US, approached the Syrian conflict cautiously, haunted by past interventions, especially the Iraq War. The Obama administration condemned Assad's brutality, but avoided direct intervention, fearing another prolonged conflict. The rise of ISIS forced the West to form an international coalition to combat the extremist threat. The intervention was complicated by conflicting objectives and regional tensions. A new Cold War, Russia's strategic chessboard. Russia, under Putin, saw the Syrian conflict as a chance to reassert its influence and challenge the West. In 2015, Russia intervened in Syria, supporting Assad's forces. This intervention tipped the balance in Assad's favor. Beyond aiding Assad, Russia projected its military might and tested new weapons. The conflict showcased Russia's capabilities, hinting at a new Cold War-style rivalry. The Syrian conflict, with its complex web of actors and interests, defies a lasting solution. Regional and international powers have turned it into a proxy war, prolonging suffering. Peace talks often collapse amid renewed fighting and mistrust. The conflict is a stark reminder of war's human cost. It highlights the need for diplomacy and dialogue. The international community must find a just and lasting solution. The Syrian War, spanning over a decade, is a stark testament to the devastating human cost of conflict. Imagine vibrant cities reduced to rubble, people scattered by war. This conflict has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and displaced millions. The Syrian War is a story of immense suffering and the fragility of peace. As we reflect on the Syrian War, we are left with more questions than answers. The conflict, far from reaching a resolution, remains a complex and intractable quagmire, with no easy solutions in sight. The Assad regime, though weakened by years of war, remains firmly entrenched in power, bolstered by its allies, Russia and Iran. The Syrian opposition, fragmented and lacking a cohesive strategy, struggles to present a united front against the regime. Meanwhile, the Syrian people remain trapped in a cycle of violence and displacement, their hopes for a better future hanging in the balance. The international community, divided by competing interests and a lack of political will, has failed to find a lasting solution to the conflict. The Syrian War, an unfinished chapter in a region rife with turmoil, serves as a stark reminder of the challenges of peacemaking in the 21st century. Despite the complexities and challenges, we cannot afford to turn away from the plight of the Syrian people. The Syrian War, while geographically distant for many, is a global tragedy that demands a global response. We have a moral obligation to alleviate the suffering of those caught in the crossfire, to hold those responsible for atrocities accountable, and to work tirelessly towards a just and lasting peace. We must support humanitarian organizations providing life-saving aid to those in need: food, water, shelter, medical care, and psychosocial support. We must advocate for the protection of civilians, the respect for international law, and the pursuit of a negotiated settlement that addresses the root causes of the conflict. The Syrian War is a test of our collective conscience, a reminder that we are all interconnected and that our destinies are intertwined. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Syrian War, a conflict that has profoundly shaped the Middle East and left an indelible mark on our world. The story of Syria is far from over. It continues to unfold before our eyes. By understanding the complexities of this conflict, the motivations of the actors involved, and the devastating human cost, we can become more informed citizens, better equipped to engage in meaningful dialogue and advocate for a more peaceful and just world. If you found this video insightful and thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to History Tales and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on our latest explorations of the past. Together, let us continue to learn from history, engage in meaningful conversations, and work towards a brighter future for all.